This may look like an unassuming game from the 90s, a relic from a time when 3D was still largely uncharted territory, but beyond its primitive exterior is a game that was not only technologically innovative, but had a story, characters, and a universe that captured the imaginations of a generation. A game that resonated with players in a way that most games never do, making such an impression that we're still talking about it nearly 30 years later. This is Lego Island.
It was really an extensive project involving very talented people.
I mean, it was outrageous, the amount of talent behind that.
I think we were having so much fun. We didn't consider that we were doing something that no one else had ever done.
We were at the bleeding edge, and they were just learning from us.
Today, LEGO video games are an institution, a business worth over $2 billion, but there's a good chance none of it would exist had this, their first real venture into them, not worked out. And with one of the biggest toy companies in the world gambling on an entirely new medium, success was anything but guaranteed. But LEGO's bet happened to be on the right people at the right time, who made something great in the face of technical challenges, corporate conflicts, and ultimately, betrayal.
Hello!
Like many risky ventures, Lego Island had a lot riding on it. Its conception is the story of two companies who, despite being in different fields and on opposite sides of the planet, were both formerly successful businesses, suddenly going through hard times.
Of course, we can't talk about Lego Island without first talking about its namesake, Lego. And really, what's there to say? The chances of you stumbling upon this video and not knowing Lego is virtually zero. There are probably space aliens on the Andromeda Galaxy who have heard about Lego. Since 1947, year after year, these toys just seem to get more and more popular. Or do they?
Our top story tonight, the Danish toy maker Lego has announced a loss of 194 million kroner, or 45 million pounds last year, its first annual loss since the company was founded in the 1930s.
For the first time, Lego's sales were also struggling a little bit. There was a real doubt inside the company, even high up, that whether the Lego idea was a kind of done. You have seen other toys come and go, so maybe the world was changing.
Ever since the start of the company, basically, they'd always had an increase in turnover every year. Increase in turnover, increase in profits. So they just simply did not know crisis. But they came to know that in the late 90s.
The company, best known for its interlocking plastic bricks, has reported stagnating growth since 1993.
So after 50 years, what was giving Lego such a headache? Well, indeed, the world was changing. And while Lego had always had competitors in the toy industry, the 80s and 90s had birthed a brand new, much fiercer competitor. Or I guess I should say, competitors.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't.
Yeah, you guessed it. While some missteps in the early 80s may have made them easy to write off as a passing fad, by the 90s it was undeniable. Nintendo, Sega, and their vicious civil war were dominating the hearts and minds of kids all around the world. The writing was on the wall. Kids were putting down bricks and picking up a different kind of brick. Or, whatever this was.
I love the Power Glove. It's so bad.
By comparison, it wasn't hard for Lego to look like old news.
This young boy had such fun, he used Lego one by one.
I went to this meeting where our international marketing research, the first slide they showed was they said, Lego is the 5th largest toy company in the world. Number 1 is Nintendo, and number 2 was Mattel, and number 3 was Sega, and number 4 was Hasbro, and then Lego. And then they said Nintendo and Sega, we don't look at because they don't do construction toys. They were looking at competitors of companies that would do like Lincoln Logs or something, not at who was competing for the children's time. I was flabbergasted. I was like, what? Don't they see what's happening?
A lot of uncertainty and also some resistance, I would say, to really take digital into sort of the heart of Lego.
It was absolutely a challenge, and they also had no place in the digital world at that point. We had to teach them about the business and then try to convince them that they needed to be in it.
Oh dear.
At some point, somebody at Lego and even at the top realized that software was interesting.
I was asked to look into the market for children's software. We made our recommendations that the Lego Group, in one way or another, had to enter that market because it was going to infect everything around kids' play.
I was sort of hired also to look more into what we could do with digital in general. We were mostly just presenting a lot of different ideas. There was a new thing called the PC. Maybe all people would have a computer at home, for real and so on, but no one knew really what direction it would take.
LEGO was finally willing to at least experiment with digital ideas, but they were still several years away from being able to make their own video games, and the world wasn't going to sit around and wait for them to be ready. Wouldn't it be great if they could get some help from people who already knew how to navigate this new world?
I might be wrong, but it was always my recollection that the US guys were really pushing to get LEGO into the software business. They knew that it was a place that was going to be important, and they just wanted to find a good partner to help them figure it out.
Founded in the suburbs of Chicago in 1983, Mindscape had carved out a respectable game publishing business, eventually even becoming one of the elite few to secure a license to publish for that pesky Nintendo. In 1988, it was acquired by and merged into the software Toolworks, a California-based developer best known for educational games like Chess Master 2000 and Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing. Toolworks, who mostly wanted that lucrative Nintendo contract, could now lean even harder into the educational market with games like Miracle Piano and a series of officially licensed Mario games. Things were looking good. So good that in 1994, Pearson, yes, the company that makes your textbooks, acquired them and renamed the whole company back to Mindscape.
Mindscape. Yes, I much approve of that.
You do?
It's a quantum leap above software Toolworks.
While Pearson was heavily criticized for overpaying for Mindscape, they had high hopes that venturing into software would pay off in the long run. In the first 2 years under Pearson, Mindscape lost over $75 million.
Welcome to Novato, California. A quiet town, relatively speaking, about 20 miles north of San Francisco. This is where Software Toolworks, or Mindscape by this point, moved to just before the development of LEGO Island. This exact building, in fact, which they built themselves from the ground up. Not bad for a company that, on paper at least, seemed to be hemorrhaging money.
We just did an awful lot of different things. We had edutainment, entertainment, utility software, and always had an eye to something new and interesting.
Just like the toy industry was changing around LEGO, so was the video game industry around Mindscape. New talk of 3D and the Hollywood model meant that Mindscape was feeling a lot of pressure to keep up and pursue higher profile clients.
The Software Toolworks presents...
By the mid-90s, Mindscape's most successful games were based on licensed properties. They'd made games for Star Wars, games for Nintendo, games for Warhammer, all these things that were really popular with kids. Hey, you know what else is really popular with kids?
We certainly were interested in a content partner that brought as much to the table as LEGO did. We put a couple of very good guys on it, Paul Melmid, Mark Rogears, and a guy named Wes Jenkins.
Wes Jenkins was about as far from the corporate suits as you could get. Having grown up in the counterculture of the 60s and 70s and even attending the original Woodstock in 1969, he and his wife Kyle eventually joined the hippies and artists of San Francisco, doing art jobs for just about anyone they could, and making friends with all the other struggling artists in the area.
Wes Jenkins and Kyle Bogerman, they lived in apartment number 9. We lived in apartment number 3.
They were both really charming, really smart, really talented.
And we would get together and they had a radio show going called Radio Shorts.
Monday, come on down. Tuesday, doesn't matter. Sunday, no credit, no job, no car, come on down. No semi-annual minus charge for buying worthless junk you don't need like the pathetic sheep you are.
It was utter madness and mayhem. Everybody would come in with scripts for these comedy bits. When the people were not singing or playing instruments on a given part, the others would be drinking and eating in the other room.
It was nuts, but it was really fun.
Quite a production, too.
A lot of people coming and going. And Jack Daniels involved.
Some.
Yeah, some.
Yeah, it's one of those things you look back on and realize you only get to do things like that a couple of times in your life.
Throughout the 80s, Wes had managed to do one-off jobs for the likes of NASA, Disney, PBS, and even Frank Zappa, but by the 90s had landed a lowly job as an artist at the Software Toolworks. Artists at the time were the necessary evil for most programmers. Programmers designed everything, the concept, the game, and would even insert programmer art for us to follow. Really, you couldn't risk the artist to be in charge of anything important. Lord knows what they'd do. It was a cultural issue. But that culture was about to change. As graphics technology advanced and became an increasingly important selling point, game developers like Mindscape were going to start needing their artists more than ever. Mark Rogiers, head of the newly formed Home and Kids division, asked the guy in the cubicle next to mine, who had just transferred to the art team as a former programmer, to make a 3D Lego brick. He made a rectangle with 6 little bumps on top, and it could be moved around like magic. We were blown away. But of course, Mindscape realized they needed more than just a 3D brick if they were going to pitch a real product to LEGO. They needed a concept, and for that, they turned to none other than Wes Jenkins himself. Whether it was because I was the next cubicle over, or the programmers were too busy and I was available, I like to think it was because the bosses thought I was the right guy for the assignment. Whatever the reason was for choosing Wes Jenkins, they were right. Because it turns out Mindscape was far from the first company to try pitching a video game to LEGO. Sure, it took a long time before LEGO themselves were convinced, but many others had realized you could build LEGO with a computer. But LEGO knew that the whole point of their bricks was that you were using your hands to make something in the real world. What was the point if by the end everything you made was stuck inside a computer? And that was the genius of Wes Jenkins. He was the first person to propose something else. Rather than recreating the real-world experience of making things out of LEGO, Wes Jenkins' idea was to capture what happens in your imagination when you play with LEGO, what it would be like to be a LEGO person in a LEGO world, and from their point of view, something that would especially make sense in 3D.
You know, the only way to visit Lego Island is to become a Lego person!
Mindscape higher-ups liked the concept too, and decided it was worth reaching out to LEGO to see what they thought. Except, they didn't really have a way to do that. I mean, if this was high school, Mindscape was like the nerdy guy trying to get the attention of the popular girl. Clearly, they were going to have to do something radical.
Some people have Christmas and Hanukkah to get excited for the new toys coming out for the holiday season. For me, it starts in February at Toy Fair.
In order to find an elusive contact at LEGO, Mindscape sent Wes Jenkins and their educational expert Paul Melmed here, the International Toy Fair in New York City.
Tearing up the streets in 1995 and destroying the competition.
They were tasked with simply finding someone, anyone who could get them into the good graces of LEGO, and amazingly enough, they actually did. Tucked into a corner on the second floor of the building was LEGO's US marketing director, Chuck McLeish.
He explains that LEGO is not really in the business of making video games, and a bunch of companies, hundreds, have already approached them, and they have all proposed these building with LEGO programs on the computer. Paul explains that we could actually increase the sales of the bricks with this product. This is different. Our idea is more of a story, an interactive adventure.
Oh, well, that was interesting.
Chuck seemed impressed, and gives Paul the phone number of the guy at the headquarters in Connecticut. He suggested we call and set up an appointment.
Maybe it was down to the idea, maybe it was being in the right place at the right time, maybe it was through the sheer charm of Wes Jenkins and Paul Melmed, but just like that, Mindscape had an in with LEGO. LEGO's US bosses in Connecticut were similarly intrigued by their idea, but ultimately none of it mattered unless they could also impress the guys at the top, and for that, they would need to book a trip to Europe.
I would say there was a clear amount of nervousness when we went to London in '95 to have that meeting, because everybody that mattered at LEGO was there.
We were on Monkey Island, which is a little island outside of London. This is where LEGO did their royalty deals.
Our fate was in the hands of LEGO because we had to get their approval on so many, many levels.
LEGO was always perfect, and they never put it in a box until they knew that it was going to work. Computer software, when we were working on LEGO Island, every product crashed. If it crashed 20% of the time, you felt, hey, let's put it in a box, it's pretty good. Well, try that with these guys who want perfection.
And one of the things I learned is that the Danish have different personality traits than we do. They're very friendly, but they don't wear their emotions on their sleeves. And you know, when we were sitting there delivering this several hour-long presentation to them, there was very little facial feedback or very little smiles, very little anything that came out of them.
We walked in with a small computer and let it run, and it was magnificent. It worked. We could take a mouse and have a Lego car spin 360 on the screen. No one had ever seen that before, ever. Then the president of Lego, he said to me, so Dr. Melmed, you were telling me 7-year-olds love computers. I said, absolutely. He said, how can you guarantee me that your product won't cannibalize mine? Are they going to like it so much they won't buy my bricks anymore? Now here I was, his education guy, you know, talking to one of the wealthiest guys on the planet, perhaps. And I said, no, just the opposite's going to happen, because once they solve problems on the screen, they'll want to get their hands on the real product. And that also happened. Their sales went up.
And what I recall is at the end of the thing, we actually got an ovation from the Lego team. And as we walked out of the room, I said to Chuck McLeish, who was the US guy from Lego, I said, "So is that good?" He said, "Well, I've worked here, many years. And on my best presentation, they said to me, well, that wasn't so bad." We felt that we had it in the bag at that point.
Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines, please, and go!
And they were off. What had started as nothing more than a crude brick on a screen was now a fully fledged production with one of the biggest toy companies in the world, and all headed by Wes Jenkins, who only months earlier was on the bottom of the Mindscape totem pole. No pressure, right? But for Wes, it was a dream come true, and he could hardly believe his luck. I couldn't quite figure out how I ended up in this Forrest Gump-like opportunity. I assumed that I'd be asked to go back to moving pixels around and they'll take it from here. It was just the way the industry worked, and that's the way the game artist's job was in 1995. Shortly after landing the deal, Mark Rogiers and Dave Gronowetsky left Mindscape for other companies. While Wes Jenkins and Paul Melmert were clearly great at coming up with ideas and pitching them, they needed someone who could help run the project, someone who could make sure everything ran smoothly and provide a bridge between the business side and the creative side. Someone like this.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, and I'm the producer of the Lego project, Adventures on Lego Island.
I heard that Mindscape was putting together a project with Lego, and I'm an old Lego fan. So I just thought, well, this is fantastic. I didn't think that they really understood how great it was. And when I got in touch with them, I was right. They didn't really understand how great it was. The way things worked at Mindscape was you were hired, and then the next day you had to meet with everybody and tell them what was going on. And it was like, how was I supposed to know what was going on? I got together with Wes Jenkins and kind of sketched out some ideas that we had about where things were going. And I said, let's do some scripting, let's do some dialogue. And we went our own ways and came back the next day, and we had done almost identical dialogue. And I knew then that we were brothers, that we were going to be able to work together, and that we were shared the same sort of ridiculous comic sensibilities. We became really close friends.
In another moment of blind luck, Mindscape had once again managed to find just the right person for the job. Wes Jenkins and Scott Anderson were like long-lost brothers, constantly bouncing jokes and ideas off each other, and together with educational expert Paul Melmert, they had just the right team to write the script for Lego Island.
It was so much fun. We would go and we would have these meetings. We would take them off campus because it was oftentimes impossible to do any work at Mindscape itself. And we would have yes meetings. We would get together and we would talk about all the possible things that we could do. And nobody was allowed to say no, because there was no constraint, because nobody was saying no all the time. We would talk about all these great ideas. And then the next day we would come back, hopefully a little more sober, and everybody would try and figure out which of those ideas were the best. Based upon thinking about it overnight, people came up with different ideas. People came up with reasons why we might want to scale back here and go forward here. So we were guided by a lot of really good ideas and threw away a lot of really bad ideas. And those are the two things that we had to do.
So Lego Island had a team of dedicated writers, but who are they going to get to read it? Contrary to what you might think, software companies in the 90s weren't exactly bursting at the seams with voice acting talent. If only one of them had been hosting a comedy radio show for years at that point, and therefore knew a bunch of singers and voice actors. Hey, wait a minute!
So he got involved a lot of the people that he knew and that he'd been working with. Lauren Nelson, for instance, he did a ton of stuff. And then he also knew a lot of voiceover people.
He had a knack for finding really talented people who were really funny.
I was the one that went, "Why don't you face it? We're lost."
Face it, you're lost.
I know there's an exit around here somewhere.
And then I was also
You were what's your
Nancy Nubbin.
The biggest thing to remember, it's like you're a cartoon guy. You're a cartoon gal. So
And I am.
And you
In
are.
my mind.
And you are. So the neatest thing is to push it over the top.
Okay.
When you feel as though there is a need to ham it up, that's really good.
Well, ain't she a beaut? Click on the car if you want to get in, and drive safe now.
Of course, Wes Jenkins' radio background manifested in more obvious ways too.
That's all right. We make a pizza, we make a pasta, we make lots of money. Why? We're the only place to eat on the island. Just remember our motto, Briccolinis. Where else you gonna eat?
With a passionate team of writers, as well as a few of their friends, everything seemed to be falling into place. Except one thing. One huge elephant in the room that could make or break the entire project. The whole thing had been designed around this idea that for the first time you could really get into the head of a Lego person. But In truth, they still weren't entirely sure that was possible.
There was 3D at the time, but there was 3D in the form of like Doom, where you were inside of a room, and then there was 3D where you were up in an airplane flying over terrain. Combining those two to get the long distance and close-up distance was not something that was being done at the time. And we were told that it wasn't possible.
We knew that nobody had really tried anything of the sort before because we had nothing whatsoever to refer to.
Even though it was a big company then and it was somewhat formalized, we were still all learning how we were building games. They were still evolving so much.
So it wasn't a matter of just getting a cookbook and figuring things out. It was really a matter of slogging through the creation of every single little bit of this. There was a tricky thing in terms of hiring programmers, in terms of hiring artists. I got a hold of Dennis Goodrow. Dennis and I are old friends. We were college roommates.
Hi, I'm Dennis Goodrow. Thank you, Parajat. What we're looking at here is the jet ski race that's part of the Adventures on Lego Island.
He's just brilliant, and he is one of the best programmers in the world.
And we spent a lot of time looking for ways of using Direct 3D to get the maximum performance and still deliver the best quality images.
Performance. That's what it all came down to. Rendering a nice 3D image? People have been doing that for years by that point, but rendering them so quickly that you can actually facilitate gameplay on an average family computer at the time? Therein lies the real challenge.
There's a portion that you're actually building the little race car, right? And the Lego parts are spinning in. If you don't get the math right, each part will grow and shrink as it's turning. That had a cool effect, don't get me wrong, but that was a crazy challenge. Just getting the math right and getting it performant enough with the CPUs that were not Pentiums, right? This was meant to run also on a 486. Slower than your Apple Watch. Significantly slower than your Apple Watch.
There were days that were filled with trying to do things to improve performance. You know, the part where you go in the race, the whole reason for going in the caves and all that was having it be mostly black in there improved the performance enough so that we said, okay, we can have a little race game in here and it'll work. So that was one of the kinds of things we do. Making it an island was limiting how much you had to worry about. You know, it wasn't an unlimited world.
Mindscape had licensed this library that eventually Microsoft purchased called Retain Mode. Unless you knew exactly what Retain Mode was doing, you wouldn't get it performant enough. And that was a very big challenge. I would fly to Microsoft and talk to them. They also didn't know many of the answers that I was asking, and they were trying to figure out as I provided hints of problems. So it didn't take me long to realize we were at the bleeding edge, and they were just learning from us.
And a lot of the people running the project said, well, we don't understand. If I open a door in Lego Island, what happens? And I said, well, what happens in your house when you open the door? There's the world outside. And they said, that's weird. It was difficult to explain to management, and it was difficult for the entire team.
The harder part was like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Oh, it doesn't fit in the constraints, and I only have this much room.
And then I would come back and ask Dennis, we got to make this car go up over a ridge, spin down, go down a lane and not fall into the ocean and spin around again. He says, are you kidding? And then Scott would insist on it, and Wes said how cool it could be. You know, we wanted to do what the kids thought would be really fun.
360-degree rotation, and I'm still pushing Mongo footed. Am I a rad ripper or what?
The team grew, but internally it was a very, very small team. For the most part, the artists were working on a few tables around just one or two corners.
But we had, buckets of toys to play with and acting like, 10 years old, going do at lunchtime. What if you did this? If somebody came in the room, they'd go, you get paid for this?
And in the middle of the room was this huge physical model of the island that had been designed by Wes Jenkins.
It was like an enlarged pool table with a flat top with a sort of a scale model of Lego Island, right?
It was about 20 by 30 feet. It was large. We had to get a special room. We always tested the thing. That was the other thing that we did.
I would bring groups of children in to look at the island and play.
And that was the coolest thing. Little kids would come in, it's not the iPhone now. They would literally come in with a real camera, disposable camera, and take pictures with me. I wish I could, any one of you that hear this, if you have a picture, you can send that to me. That would be fantastic. I would love to see that.
The kids taught us all sorts of things. I mean, the kids were just fantastic. Lego was also trying to figure out the difference between boys and girls. And we found out there really wasn't that much difference. I mean, Lego decided we're mostly boys that are buying our product. Let's have some girls. So they started creating pink and purple bricks. And we said, that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing that the girls like pink and purple. They were playing just like the boys were, which I think shocked Lego. That feedback was why we knew when it came out that it was going to be a hit. We knew that it was going to be a hit.
Well, the software guys at Mindscape felt pretty good about what they were doing, but what about the conservative toy veterans at LEGO? You have to remember these guys' slogan is, only the best is good enough, and their experience in video games at this point was basically non-existent. Did they even know what to make of this decidedly non-brick-shaped product?
We went to see them in Denmark, and Wes was going to get up and give a talk, and he couldn't. He was just so anxious, he just couldn't talk. And so he said, Scott, would you do it? And I said, well, I don't really know what you were about to say. But I got up and I gave my talk, and I wrote things on the whiteboard. And then somebody came by later and erased it, and I found out that I was using the permanent markers. So we left a great impression on, on the people at Lego. We told them that we thought that the game was going to do this and that. And they said, well, no, that doesn't make any sense, you guys. Everything has to be done with bricks. And we were like, well, can't you use ropes? Can't you use some of the standard things that people use? And they're like, no, those aren't Lego things. And so we got our first lesson in what it was like to actually do the right thing for Lego.
At the beginning, the Lego group wanted every stud on every brick to have a little Lego logo on it, like their real Legos have. And it was quite an argument to say, no, we can't do that. Nowadays, maybe you could do that, but back then there was no possibility. They insisted that Legos don't bend, so none of the characters had arms or legs that would bend. And that put quite a requirement on the animators.
You had to move their arms like this, and their head turned like this, and they don't have knees, their legs go like this, that's it. Okay, they didn't want any twisting or bending or anything.
You know, so you had to figure out how to express with those limitations. I can only play the piano like that. Or maybe my head pops off to express something.
This notion of how do Lego characters move? Can they bend their arms when they can't bend their arms in real life? Because like a Lego character can't drink from a cup, you know? There was a Lego parrot, but it couldn't fly because its wings were, you know, they were part of the body. But it was like a religion about that.
Surprised we actually even made a helicopter look like it was flying by itself, you know?
Now, when Lego Island 2 came out, the first thing you see is like Pepper like twists and his whole body twists. And I'm like, oh, well, they just threw that out the window.
And it took a long time for Lego to figure out how to actually do software. You have to imagine people looking at software and saying, but it's not got no studs on it. They would tell us, you know, if you do software, we have to have the final screenshots 18 months before launch. And in software, we were not even starting to create screens, you know, 18 months. We were like, no, we can deliver it a week before. You know, it's like, so there was a completely cultural clash there.
When we told Lego that it was going to take 2 years to create the product, they were stunned. They were taken aback. They were not happy. Ultimately, what we decided to do in order to placate them in a sense was we created these little miniature parts of the program and we completed them. We brought them all the way to completion. So we had the building of the jet ski and we completed that. And then we put that onto a disc and we sent it off to Lego. We showed them how it worked. They were very happy because then they had something that showed that we were actually doing something. They were really, really hard to please. But what happened as a consequence is we made something that was better than we ever would have thought to make without them.
For the Lego Group, nothing short of world-class quality will do.
And that wasn't the only perk of LEGO's high standards. Remember how Mindscape was like the nerdy kid in high school? Well, being with a popular girl definitely had its perks.
When you're representing Lego, you can knock on any door. Everybody talks to you. Everybody loves Lego. That brand was so amazing in terms of getting us through doors and getting us to talk to people.
The voice actors were amazing. I mean, having my first cinematic beat to June Foray's voice, who I listened to as a kid doing Broomhilda and Rocky and Bullwinkle, was like, ooh.
Where's my piano? Oh, here it is.
You know, and this is the voice I grew up with. I was a little kid listening to like Rocky and Bullwinkle, you know? I mean, that was amazing.
I would sit there in my cubicle and I would be talking to actors and rock and roll people. You know, we were talking to Aerosmith, we were talking to all these people.
We were originally going to have some Beach Boys songs in Lego Island.
You gotta catch a wave and you're sitting on top of the world.
We had to deal with Brooke Shields. She was going to be called Brick Shields, of course, and they all wanted to work on the project because they knew Lego. Lego was such a great brand. We didn't get all of them because we couldn't afford all of them, but it was all right. The way that it turned out, we had some really good musicians anyway.
You can build a buggy, drive a big tow truck.
When I wrote the music, I was trying to think like a kid, and if I was like 8 years old and really high on sugar, what would I want to hear?
Wes gave us a title and a list of things they wanted to be mentioned.
Oh, that's right, yeah. A bunch of the phrases in the song came straight from him. That drove how the music felt, which in turn drove the rest of the words we needed. Add a little bit of Bondo and some glue to hold it together. I also supplied Mama Briccolini's piano playing.
Hey, Pepper, what do you think of this? That's nice, isn't it?
I went over to a friend's house and spent a day racking my brain, getting to the point where I was pounding at the piano because they wanted lots of little tiny pieces and they all had to be different.
For all the music that was used on Lego Island, there was easily twice as much that was pitched.
So what if they didn't have that many celebrities working on the game? What they did have, from the artists to the programmers, were passionate workers committed to holding this game over the finish line, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, was easier said than done.
For the most part of the game, you had 3 engineers do most of the coding, which was crazy. The coding probably took less than 13 months. It was a crazy pace.
Towards the end, Dennis and I would work really late into the evening trying to fix some bugs and burn some CDs so that QA people could start testing in the morning. I'd get home at 1 o'clock in the morning and then leave at 7 or 8 the next morning to go back to work. And my wife's friends would say, oh, he's having an affair, there's something going on. But it was really, it didn't feel like hard work at that point. It was just, there was a lot to get done.
You had to get it out before Christmas. There was no internet, so you can't patch the game. We're talking about working 80 hours a week.
It's definitely not without its pain. I mean, every day I feel, oh God, I can't get this to work. Even 30 years later, I know it's terrible. I walk away and I come back and I look at the work and I go, oh wait, I know what to do. And then before you know it, you've just invested another 4 hours and you made, oh yeah. And you did a 12-hour day.
We sat there and worked and I would drink my Mountain Dew and I'd put my cans on the window and slowly build up this stack of Mountain Dew cans over the course of how many months, I don't know, but I filled up the wall.
You're always rewarded with pizza on a late night. You're working a lot of hours. You go out with your sweetheart after no pizza. Because work gives us lots of pizza.
We were very serious about it. We spent all of our time. This was, we were all working very, very hard on this, and it was a labor of love. There was never a moment where we thought that, oh, we just have to get this done because we have to get it done. It was like, not only do we need to get it done, but we need to get it done better. And we were just always pumping each other up to go farther and to do more than what anybody else was doing at the time.
For some reason, I never get tired. Of course, I'm a nervous wrench.
Our project was uniquely happy for a software development project. Our team was coming in on the weekends to do something in secret. I didn't know what it was, and they didn't want me to know. They wanted to surprise me.
Check this out. You can find this Le Gondrion.
They had taken all the art masters and redone them in Legos, and they did it on their own. Nobody told them to do that. That was not a part of the plan.
That's been sitting on my desk ever since. That's 25 years sitting on my desk.
That's the kind of enthusiasm. That's the kind of, we're going to do it because we love it. That's what went into this game.
While it's never easy reaching the end of a large-scale project, the LEGO Island team actually had a better time than most. Their method of completing the game piece by piece to appease LEGO also ended up making it a lot easier to plan and keep track of time throughout development.
We had been creating these parts all the way along and finishing those parts that we had been showing off to LEGO and taking to the toy fairs and things like that. So at the end, there was a crunch. There's always a crunch at the end, but it was pretty close to being right on time.
LEGO Island went gold on August 8th, 1997. That's when everyone had to put their pencils down and turn in whatever they'd done. A project has to end at some point, right? Otherwise you'd be constantly adding things to it forever.
We didn't do as much as we wanted. The place still looks kind of barren. We got to a pretty hard release date and there was still stuff undone.
There was always the, ooh, let's add that in. And then, oh, it takes that much work. And
Moving around the island in an uncontrollable way is something that I really wish we had taken care of. We knew it was going to be a problem when machines were sped up when we released it, but they wouldn't give me the time to take care of it.
And in fact, there are some people trying to actually update LEGO Island somehow. I'm not sure how that's going to work because I don't know who has the source code.
Sure, they may have wished that they could have done more, but let's not diminish what they accomplished. 640 by 480 3D gameplay at a time when consoles were only pushing 240p. Simultaneous music, sound effects, and video all off a 2x CD-ROM and only 16 megabytes of RAM. And most importantly, a game that simulated not just the physical experience of playing with LEGO, but the emotional experience too. What it's like as a kid pretending to be a LEGO person in a LEGO world. Wes Jenkins' vision, which had guided the project from the beginning, had finally come to fruition. At this point, what could possibly go wrong?
When I first met him, he was complaining about management. And I thought, oh, what a whiny baby. The first person I'm going to fire here is Wes. And then like the next day when we came back and we saw that we'd written the same scripts, I thought, wait, this isn't right. Clearly this guy is fantastic. And then that's when I kind of found out that he was right about management. They were really bad. They were kind of evil.
Towards the tail end of the product release, Mindscape hired a hatchet man to replace the existing CEO. A colleague brought in an article where the gentleman, the new CEO, had performed his task of taking apart companies and selling their remaining assets. The article from a Midwest community paper asked the question, where is he now? He was here.
I had heard that working for a game company at the time was very dysfunctional and unpleasant, and that was certainly the case.
Well, if you just, think about the people that you work around, it was great. Some of the structure above was not to my palate.
Since then, I've started several companies, got VC funded and everything else. And I can tell you, you hear all these stories about VCs and everything else, that this functionality that we're talking about at Mindscape is several times magnitudes of anything I've experienced since then.
Movie day was infamous. We all got to go to the movie theater next door. And then when we got back, some of us had a job, some of us didn't. There was pink slips on the desks. Yeah.
There was a lot of sniping.
I think somebody, when they saw how this was taking shape, somebody wanted to push Scott out of the way and take over and be in charge of it.
The other vice presidents claimed that we did not know what we were doing and claimed that the whole thing was a con job.
It turned out that the entire project and my managers and their managers were on very, very thin ice.
And they said, well, let's see what they've got. And if they don't have something by Monday, we're going to fire everybody and put these new guys in charge. Well, the next Monday came by and we gave them a demo and blew their socks off. We beat them soundly, but it was not a fun kind of project from the Mindscape corporate point of view.
And if that wasn't enough, it was about to get even worse.
In those days, the industry tradition was that the team responsible for the development of a product would receive a substantial bonus, providing that they stayed on until the day of release. The bonus was based on the pro forma estimate of how many products would be sold. Normally at that time, a good sale was around 10,000 units to a high of 100,000 units. LEGO Island sold 7 million units. The bonuses would have been pretty substantial.
And then when they realized on the very first day that it was going to cost them a lot of money, they fired the team.
They laid us off. I was actually out on vacation at the time. and they just laid everybody off.
Which, saddened all of us. In fact, it angered many of us.
And we ended up taking the Mindscape to court, and we won. And so a lot of those people got some money back, but nobody got the bonuses that they deserved. So that was, if you ask me, that's fairly criminal.
They claimed that Mindscape wasn't going to make any more games like that. Of course, later I think they did. I think they just didn't want to pay.
Which was very sad. We had another set of games. We had 2 games planned out. They were going to be fantastic. And Lego was very excited by it. I think that they were shocked to find out that Mindscape was so unscrupulous. When they saw what they did, ultimately, it was like, oh, geez, you guys.
So they wanted to get the rights back, and Mindscape struck a deal that effectively paid for all of Mindscape's development costs on Lego Island, plus Mindscape got to keep royalties. So it made Lego Island pure profit for Mindscape at that point.
We're very sorry that these things didn't happen. We're very sorry that management turned out to be a bunch of I'll try and think of a better name than the one that keeps coming through my head. The way that I viewed it was they had the goose that was laying the golden eggs, and they decided that they liked pate. So what can you say?
LEGO Island was released on September 26, 1997 to critical acclaim and commercial success. It became a bestseller in 1997 and 1998, won Best Kids Game at the first Interactive Achievement Awards, and increased Mindscape's sales by a whopping 70%. A pizza place in Legoland would be named after the Briccolinis, and it left a permanent impression on anyone who played it at the right age. But arguably, LEGO Island's biggest impact was proving to LEGO that video games were a way forward. LEGO was fully bought in, and to this day, a new video game has been released every single year with the LEGO name on it, usually more than one. Over the years, that's added up to over 100 LEGO video games, and they all to some extent owe their existence to LEGO Island. But for the game's dedicated creators, its release was mostly bittersweet.
At E3, I was approached by the CEO of Mindscape, who explained it was just good business. He smiled the sparkly smile that only a well-coiffed CEO can give as he fires people. I ran into some of the administrative managers and they gave me a hug. They realized that the product put them on the map for a better sale of the company. Later that day, at the E3 award ceremony, one of the VPs accepted the award for Best of the Show, Kids title. He said, "I'd like to thank the team that created this product, but we fired them." I like a good joke too.
Mindscape might have fired the team that brought them millions of dollars, but for many of them, that wasn't the last time they worked together.
We started working together and just kept at it. We're all over the map, if you ever listen to our stuff.
We have no focus.
No focus, no commercial potential.
Dennis and I, we both went off to found a company called Big Fix that later on we sold to IBM.
But mostly, a lot of us went on to do The Sims.
SimCity 3, SimCity 4, SimCity 4 expansion pack, Tiger Woods Golf, and a bunch of variations of that.
We ended up working in so many projects, they start melding together. It's just a great team of people.
Dave Cherry and I and Tara were all at Burning Man in like 1996 or 7. The people that I worked with, I go in every day and we had fun. You know, I didn't go to work, I went to fun.
That's what the game was about. And if we weren't having fun, how the heck were the kids gonna have fun? You know, all the problems, all the politics, be damned. We're making a fun game and we're having fun doing it.
I didn't think this long after it that people would still be talking about it or anything. I think that's pretty nifty. I like that.
We knew that we were doing everything that we could possibly do to make it a classic. But just because you want to do that doesn't mean it's going to happen. The idea that it could last this long, that actually warms your heart because it means that putting your all into it can pay off. We were lucky to get that group of people together. I don't think it's going to be easy to get a group like that together again.
And what about the man who started it all, Wes Jenkins? Well, after a brief stint working for Sierra Online, he ended up being offered a job by LEGO themselves.
LEGO was really fond of Wes.
They got it. They understood Wes as well.
But working for LEGO required him to live in Europe, specifically the LEGO media offices in London, and there were factors that soon arose that made it hard to live overseas.
We were in the trenches, and so we all were good buddies, and we stayed good buddies for a long time. He ran into a lot of health problems after LEGO Island.
In 2000, Wes Jenkins was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. Over the years, as his condition worsened, he was forced to leave his position at LEGO. Eventually, he became bedridden and unable to work at all.
So we did what we could to try and help him out, but ultimately he succumbed to heart problems and problems with his circulatory system. And I miss him terribly. Life was not kind to him, though, toward the end, and that was really sad to see that, to see that all happening.
Wes was a cartoon character.
He was just such a neat energy, just full of creativity.
Wes was the driving comedic force in this game. I even found myself just yesterday, just because somebody mentioned a name, Joaquin. Joaquin was a character in LEGO Island. Joaquin the dog. I know, right? It's like silly. The two ambulance people, they were like Dr. Seuss, like pull me, push you kind of things, you know? Wes was all about that.
He was just a genius, and he was not well respected because he was very self-deprecating.
And I remember he drove the crappiest little car. He was like the big man on the team.
And people kind of took him for when he was self-deprecating. They went along with his self-assessment. It was like, no, that's not right. You guys, that blowhard over there, he's the guy that you should be looking down on. This guy who's talking humbly about himself, this is the guy who is the genius. And it was hard. We all had to help sell him, because once we knew what a genius he was, everybody else was listening to him saying, oh, I'm just this humble, whatever. And he wasn't. He was fantastic.
I think a lot of the whole personality of LEGO Island was Wes.
Yeah, that was Wes. If you know the game, you know Wes.
After listening to all these stories, it suddenly clicked why I was still so fond of this game after all this time. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that LEGO Island is not a game for adults. The gameplay is simplistic and honestly a little underwhelming. The challenge is non-existent outside of dealing with the clunky controls, and the campaign, if you can call it that, can be completed by even the most casual gamer in less than 45 minutes. But there was always just something about it. A line that still made me laugh, a song that still got stuck in my head, the memory of looking out over this tiny island yet still seeing a world of endless possibilities. I didn't know it at the time, but what I was feeling was the drive and passion behind every aspect of the game. A true labor of love that was more than the sum of its parts. I played a lot of games when I was a kid, but very few of them made an impact the way LEGO Island did. A game that never talked down to you and always made you feel like an important part of the world. The fact is, we care about LEGO Island because in a weird way, it felt like LEGO Island cared about us.
We were looking at something from Howard Gardner. Howard Gardner did multiple intelligences. And the idea was that there's not a single IQ. There's not just being smart or not being smart. There's being musical, there's being able to write, there's being able to do math. There's all these different things that people can do. And so we purposely took it into our head that each of the characters in LEGO Island would have a different kind of intelligence. The idea that kids should be judged by a single metric, I think, is hugely damaging to them.
The kid who can read fast and do this math, he gets good grades. The one who can't do it gets poor grades. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's not the genius in the class.
So if you find out when you're a kid that you got a poor IQ or something, you might have a bad self-opinion, but you might be a musical genius. And it's like, that's all you need, find out what it is that's your thing and make it your thing. And don't let anybody grind you down with some other notions of what it is to be intelligent or what it is to be smart or any of that stuff, because everybody's got their special secret sauce. And that's kind of what we really wanted the kids to do. We wanted the kids to feel that this was a chance for them to build, to race, to shape the island, to make it theirs, to give them a voice in their own game, and try and figure out how to get through life. It's not easy, you know. Everybody's telling you what to do, and everybody's telling you what you are. And it's like, screw that. You are what you are. Figure it out. Be brave. Get out there, you know. Find your own intelligence and go with it.
And, well, good luck.
Top story tonight, the Danish toy. Yeah?
What are you doing?
Oh, I'm recording a thing for MattKC.
Oh, I like that guy. It's not about Lego Island again, is it?